It's interesting. We normally sort of expect a governing party to be behind in the polls 2 years into their administration. We're well and truly mid-term now. It's been just over 2 years since that December general election in 2019. Are we potentially reading too much into this fall in the polls, this fall in the Tory situation? Potentially, ordinarily, this would have happened much sooner into a government. In recent history. That's sort of what we might have expected in normal times. Are we reading too much into this?
Well, we don't really know because nobody knows where things will go within the next few months and the next few years. It is true that between, for instance, 1989 and 1997, the Conservative government didn't win a single by-election through that entire time. And in the period of many administrations, we've seen the governing party fall behind mid-term. But these are far from usual circumstances. And the fact that over the last 2 years, nearly now, the entire political debate has been largely dominated by discussions around COVID and the pandemic means you can't compare this time to any other period in recent history or even post-war history. And so where do we go from here? Well, a lot will depend on the coronavirus pandemic. For the past nearly 2 years, the government's popularity in the polls has corresponded very closely with how the public has perceived their performance in dealing with the pandemic. Now, a couple of months ago, we started to see that correlation begin to dissolve a little as people started to think about other things, the economy, taxation, education, etc., etc. But with the emergence of the Omicron variant, we're right back to where we were in so many ways. So we have that going on, but at the same time, we have the cumulative effect of all of these different events, be it the Downing Street renovations or Owen Paterson's scandal, or indeed the various parties that did or did not take place over the lockdown period. All of those could form a negative narrative in the minds of voters who start to think that the government doesn't play by its own rules, doesn't play fair, and crucially, cannot be trusted. Now, if that narrative gains enough momentum with enough people, it could place the Conservatives in a very, very difficult position going into, for instance, the May local elections next year. And if we see the Lib Dems as resurgent in North Shropshire as they could be in the local elections, that could in turn spell great difficulties for Boris Johnson.
Now, just quickly, it used to be the case that when there was a bit of a problem, the government could really push the lockdown button and you'd see a spike in the polls. Whenever the government would impose more restrictions, the Conservatives would go up in the polls. Is there any evidence to suggest that might not be the case this time? Are people reacting differently to the prospect of restrictions this time compared to the previous 2 or 3 lockdowns?
Well, so far, the overwhelming majority of the public is in support of Plan B, despite what some of the backbench Conservative MPs may indeed want or say. And so we have figures of around 75% across the polling community showing support for Plan B. But it may well be the case that is not enough to save the Conservatives in this particular instance because of everything else that is going on. And certainly, if new rules are introduced, but the perception is that the government are not sticking to those rules themselves, then that could raise a lot of difficulty. And of course, these kind of lockdowns, or at least the potential use of these lockdowns, is such an important tool for the government in dealing with coronavirus. And so it will certainly want to have the option to use them. But the question remains, will the public go along with it? And I doubt even if they do, it will save them in the way that it has done previously.
Yeah,
they benefited hugely from the vaccine rollout, but we'll see.
Big questions over those policies and clearly a lot of cut-through on those stories of parties. Well, for now, Joe Twyman, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon on The Briefing for that fascinating discussion. Now,